biggest religions in the world have at their core a theology of holy war, you don't go anywhere. To me, identity is a prison. It's a cage that people stick to because they are afraid to venture out on their own. And so you need this belonging to something that's going to give you a full sense of security. There's a line in the Tao Te Ching that I love because it's so funny, where it says, "My way is very easy to understand and very easy to practice, but nobody understands it and nobody practices it."
An epic conversation with Daniele Bolelli. He is a scholar, a fascinating person, very grounded and very educated. We talked about religion. We talked about philosophy. We talked about the Tao. We talked about humanity and the spectrum of human experience. We talked about the third way that goes beyond the polarity, beyond the duality. There was tears, there was laughter, there was literal fireworks. So come drop into the infinite with Daniele Bolelli. I've been telling people recently that my greatest challenge and my greatest strength is the same thing, and it's dispersion.
Yeah, of course.
You know, and it's like, because the challenge of dispersion is that it's a little bit here and a little bit here and just kind of touching things in various places. And then the gift of dispersion is if you're able to balance and handle all those things, then you can create something so much greater than the individual parts of it.
Absolutely. I'll tell you something funny on that note that given your background, you would dig. My father, for a long time back in Italy, he would teach in this master program in fashion and design. Okay, so far so good. Except he knew nothing about fashion or design and didn't finish college. So he's like, wait, what? So how are you even allowed to? And it was funny. What happened is he had more our attitude in terms of combining things, like speaking many different languages, so to speak. So he knew just enough about the design world to be able to connect it with a wider world that all the specialists would never do. All the specialists were design, fashion, they had a certain viewpoint on it. And people who run this master program, they like the idea of somebody who could bring their students, show them that what they do in a very specific field, how it can be tied to a much larger world. And so, it's kind of random, but that was one of his things.
So you kind of take that, you get that a little bit from your dad.
Yeah,
there.
definitely. Yeah.
Wow. How did you get from the American Indian teaching to what you're doing now? Did you go back? So you went back to teaching the history of Rome, which is where you might have had some foundation in, or were there things in between the American Indian and this, or is just kind of, whatever presents itself?
I mean, the way I look at it is I'm fascinated with the human experience. I'm fascinated with history as a whole. I'm not a specialist in what happened in Paris in 1536, and that's all that I ever dedicate myself to or something.
Right.
So and that's kind of why I started doing, back in 2015, I started doing the podcast History on Fire, because I felt that even teaching a bunch of things, I felt limited. I wanted to be able to cover a whole lot more than what I could teach in college.
Yeah.
So my thing became, I'll find a story that I find it's epic, has great characters, there's something beautiful about it. I'll do a deep dive where I read just about everything there is to read on the topic. And then I'm going to try to distill it in a more engaging way. Because, history books most of the time are written in a very tedious type of way. So my job is to do all the research, learn all the stuff well, and then condense it and deliver it in a way that people actually would want to listen to, even when they are not a captive audience. So I played with that. And so in that sense, to me, anything in history, if I find it interesting enough and I spend enough time studying, then I feel good about it. So
what's piquing your interest lately? Anything that you've been learning newly or that you're diving into now that's got your attention captured?
I mean, other than right now, because I've been monstrously swamped with history of Rome, I just had to focus on that, whether I liked it or not. It's just this is what I need to do. Let me see stuff that I've done in recent days. What has been coming up in the past few months? Well, one that I guess is not like usually I tend to do specific story with specific characters and things like that. But once in a while, I do episodes that have a more philosophical bend, if you will. So I
Mm.
did one recently about, I called it historical daddy issues, because one thing that I realized was noticing how so many famous characters in history had
Mm.
god awful fathers,
Yeah.
one after another. And I was like, is that a prerequisite to make it in the history books? And then I realized maybe it's not just those guys. Maybe most people are just god awful fathers. Maybe fathers
Mm.
haven't been particularly good on average. So I started digging in, and yeah, it was enlightening to see just how bad fatherhood has been throughout most of history. There are exceptions, of course,
Yeah.
but and of course I don't want to generalize because I'm sure there are tribal cultures that we know nothing about or our evidence is very limited where maybe the story is completely different. But in terms of recorded history, yeah, you count on one hand how many great fathers you can think of. Most of them are pretty awful. And so I did this whole deep dive in how much that may influence history. Because you are talking about most of humanity growing up in a situation where if it's not straight up child abuse, it's not horrendously far from it, or
Yeah.
at best it's neglect. And so I'm like, well, that would do something to human beings. That would explain also a lot of the stuff that happened in history in terms
Mm.
of bloodshed, warfare, nasty things that people do to one another. And so I had a good time with that one.
Well, I'm really fascinated that you brought that up because what's been very alive for me right now, which I'll tell you about,
Hmm.
touches on what you just said in a way that I've never thought about before, which is fascinating. And what's been very alive for me is looking at the God of the Old Testament.
Hmm. Oh, yeah.
So let's call him Yahweh.
Yep.
And so I grew up Jewish. I'm Jewish. Um, I'm Jewish the way you're Italian. I can't not be Jewish. You cannot be Italian. Doesn't matter what you believe.
Sure. Sure.
I'm a
Okay.
Jew, but it's never very religious. And but I had my bar mitzvah and I learned how to read Hebrew, but I didn't know the translation. I just learned how to make the sounds of the characters. And then I didn't go to temple anymore and, became a very spiritual person. And similar to you, just studied anything I could about anything, very interested in all cultures and many different experiences and my own personal tribulations and plant medicines and all these things. And so my connection to God is very direct and beautiful. And I subscribe to the belief that God is infinite, and which means all one, there is no separation. I had my spinal cord injury, and then I started to connect with Yeshua, which was new for me. And he became a great teacher. And so I'm going through all these processes. Now my son is 13 and he's about to have his bar mitzvah.
Hmm.
So in the training for his bar mitzvah, I got to go to temple every Saturday. We go to temple every Saturday. And on Saturdays is when they read the Torah,
Yep.
the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible.
Yep.
And now, with all of my experiences and my beliefs and everything I've been through, I'm coming back and I'm actually reading the English because I want to know, what does it say?
Of
Now
course.
I know, there's the 10 plagues, and there's the coming out of Egypt, and then the flood, and these big stories we all know about and just sort of accept. And now and then I really enjoy with Judaism the discourse and some of the teachings, and there's a really beautiful religion and based on the Torah. And I spent a lot of time, about a decade, living with a lot of Orthodox Chabad guys, like in that community, and they love the Torah, and it's beautiful. And so now I'm actually, even though I'm 46 and I've had a lifetime of this, I feel like let me actually read the book. I've never actually read the actual English.
Yeah.
And so all that set up to say, I'm now reading it, and every week I'm reading it and going, holy shit, this is fucking crazy. Like, this is what we've been reading?
Yep.
Well, hold on a minute. What's happening here? And
Yep.
then the more that I read it, and I can be very open with lots of things. And I'm like, well, I'm having these feelings and these opinions. And the more I read it, the more it's just confirming my beliefs and this character. And like, this isn't what God does. God doesn't require millions of animals to be sacrificed. God doesn't kill his loyal servants in a snap of an eye because he gets angry and jealous. And then one more thing to add to this. I was in a relationship with somebody who has narcissist personality disorder, which I'm careful to say, I don't like to fall into labels so much, but it's not like narcissist tendency. This is like a crazy thing, small percentage. And it was crazy making to me. So I ended up, when I got out of it and understood what was happening, a long process of studying and learning what this mental condition is and how it is. And I'll tell you, man, if you go and give me all the traits of a narcissist personality disorder, all down the line, it is Yahweh to a T.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing misses. So I've been submerged in that because I think it's like, well, this one book and this story is what has seeded our culture of humanity more than any single book of this fear of God and all this stuff. And we've created a lot of light, but it's the darkest, like most bloodthirsty, narcissistic thing. And so this goes back to what you shared of a history of fathers.
Yeah.
So this is the father. I mean, there's different books, but if there's one book that has the most influence on this planet, it's that. And he is revered as the father, and it's the darkest. So I'm just going to tee that up for you to go anywhere you want with it.
No, that's man, I wish I thought of it when I was doing that episode, because you're right. I mean, I'm looking at like the small examples, and this is the big example with the capital T is the father, capital T, capital F. Yeah, it's crazy. There was a Gnostic heresy that had this theory, which is super blasphemous by any definition, and pretty funny, where they argued against any kind of atheist concept. They were saying, no, all of this is true. All of that story true, that being true, 100% correct, except what is presented as God in that story is actually the devil playing a trick and presenting himself as God, but is actually a demon who thrives on human suffering and and then, you're like, haha, funny joke. And then you look at some of the evidence and you're like, if I was a demon thriving on human suffering, this is probably what I would do, there's one story in particular there are a zillion in there, but there's one in particular that really, to me, is archetypal in how frightening it is. And it's the story, everybody hear about Moses going up Mount Sinai, 10 Commandments, and then they usually tends to skip the next part, or at most they bring up, and there were some Jewish people who were not sold, they reverted to polytheism, and so he smashed the tablets, and they usually leave it at that. And I'm like, no, that's where the juicy part begins. Let's look at what actually happens. Because when Moses comes back, he has this conversation with his loyalist, and he's looking around and he sees around camp so many people reverting to polytheistic practices with the whole golden calf thing. And so he looks at his guys and he's like, what are we to do? These are our neighbors, they are our friends, they are our family, but they are worshiping other gods. Well, there's really only one thing for us to do. Grab your swords, let's go from one side to the camp to the other and kill them. And so immediately after the whole Ten Commandment business, how you're not supposed to be murdering people, you have a religiously sanctioned massacre in which they kill 3,000 Jewish tribesmen, hacking them to pieces with swords in the name of the God that supposedly tell you that you shouldn't be murdering people. And
Yeah.
you're like, okay, let's try that again. To me, that's the foundation. As a mythology, that's the foundational archetype for all the ideas of holy war, for all the crusades, for all the jihads, for all that type of concept of the war in the name of God. Right there, to me, is the archetype for it all.
Yeah.
And it's a
Yeah.
terrifying archetype. It's just like, seriously, that's like, rather than saying, oh, you guys are weird, I think your stupid golden calf is funny and looks weird, you decide to hack them to pieces with swords.
Yeah.
Okay, that's different.
And then even if you look at the 10 Commandments, the first 3
Mhm.
are all about only worship me.
Yeah, of
I
course.
am the only one.
Yeah,
Only worship me.
yeah,
And something with narcissists, people with narcissist personality disorder, and how do they enact such what many people would call evil?
yeah,
There's a lot of people that believe that people with NPD are the most evil people on the planet. And having been on the other side of a relationship with that, I mean, I subscribe to the belief that I call everything into my own life for learning, but I can understand why people would say they are the most evil, having experienced it. And when you see it from the outside, you question why would you ever stay in that relationship?
mhm,
And I've counseled people, I've worked with people that have been in abusive relationships and just wondering, like, it's why wouldn't you leave?
yeah.
And I was in one in hindsight, but I didn't leave. And do you know why I didn't leave?
No, that's my question.
Because because I was chosen,
Mm,
the chosen
mhm,
people. The truth is, of my experience, as abusive as it was, it's like the abuse comes in drips,
yeah,
but the love comes in floods.
sure.
And so I experienced, especially early on in the relationship, a flood of love
Mhm,
and being chosen and being seen in a way that I had never experienced before. So much so that that became like my truth. And then when other things and these distortions came that didn't make sense or didn't feel so good, I'd be like, well, gosh, that didn't feel so good, but this is so good. So I can work through it.
of
And
course.
then this just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until you're in an inversion. And
Mhm.
that's essentially the story of the Israelites.
I can definitely see that because, yeah, the whole relationship is, yeah, it's pretty much textbook dysfunctional relationship because the entire thing is, you guys are not worshiping me properly. You don't give me enough love. And there's also these fairly disturbing sexual metaphors about, the comparison. It's always about how all the giant chunks of Jewish people who don't fall in line with this super strict monotheistic approach is like you are a whore that cheats on me with these other deities, and as such, I'm gonna punish you. And there's even I'm sure you probably remember better than I do where exactly it is, but there's this whole passage, which is probably among the many disturbing passages you run into. This probably takes the cake, where there's a whole thing where God is essentially saying now he's going to cause Jerusalem because Jerusalem is a whore, and so she's going to be raped, gang rape by all these foreigners and all this, and it's just like there's
I
this
actually
old.
I don't know. I'm going to look that up. So there's a,
Yeah, I'll dig that up for you later and send it to
okay,
you.
cool.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you read it and you're like, what in the actual hell am I reading here? You know, it's
Yeah.
like this uber jealous guy who's using the idea of like sexual violence as punishment for not worshiping me enough. And you're like, what's happening here? You know?
Yeah. And it's crazy, like truly crazy to see it now with fresh eyes,
Mm-hmm.
where I mean, obviously growing up Jewish, and we all have so much attachments from
Sure.
our own stories. My dad, I mean, I'm a product of the Holocaust. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
have traumas in my blood. My dad was born in pre-Israel Israel. So the stories that I grew up with and knowing, but now through the experiences coming and really being open, and then reading this, and I'm like looking around at the people in the shul, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, uh, am I the only one that sees this? And then the rabbis, and I'm even cautious too, like it's only recently that I've even felt comfortable talking about this,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's almost, it feels so sacrilegious, or all the stories of this like self-hating Jew, and we've been through so much, and like it's beautiful people and a beautiful religion, but what I deeply feel, and even sharing, talking with you, and as I'm sharing it, you're like, yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep. It's like, how many people know this? Because to me, it feels so new,
Yeah.
and it's like, when do we call it out and just say the emperor's not wearing any clothes
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stop feeding this distortion?
And I think it's extremely important to be very clear how, when, I mean, even teaching history of religions or having discussions with people, on one end, I will shine the spotlight on, and not just about Judaism, about disturbing parts of every single religion, right? It's like, I have no problem with that because that's being honest. At the same time, especially when it comes to Judaism, I think it's important to make it clear that is not an anti-Jewish thing, is not an anti-Semitic thing, because one of the things that interests me the most in the history of Judaism is the clash between Jewish people, between the hardline monotheistic, we are with Moses, we'll hack the other ones to that, but who are their victims? Occasionally there's foreign nation and all of it, but a lot of the time it's an internal things. It's
Mm,
other Jewish people getting squashed by the hardline monotheistic ones. And
mm,
that story comes up over and over and over again. It comes up in the Golden Calf Massacre. It comes up in all the clash between Elijah versus the prophets of Baal. I mean, granted, that was a foreign religion, but nonetheless, it was practiced by Jewish people. And the clash between them. I mean, there are these fights that happen between the serious we are with Moses guys and everyone else within Judaism. So to me, it's not a anti-Jewish story. It's a particular, it's the aspect that's gonna win out in Judaism, but it's
yeah,
not the only one.
yeah,
And then also the other thing to keep in mind is that doesn't matter how what a story is. What people are going to do with it sometimes is radically different, which is the
yeah,
reason why, even to this day, even among the people who go by the Torah, the interpretations are completely different. You have ultra conservative Jewish people, ultra liberal Jewish people. You have Jewish people who think homosexuality is terrible and Jewish people who are gay. You have, so I don't want to paint with one big brushstroke Judaism as if we're talking, because there is no one Judaism. There's a
right,
gazillion variations on an individual level, on different currents. So I think it would be wrong to portray it as one thing.
yeah.
But if we're talking about some of the foundational stories, yeah, those are what the foundational stories are. And they are disturbing as hell. And some of the stuff you described about the father role is terrifying.
Yeah, and ultimately, Judaism at its core, but this then becomes the Abrahamic religions,
Absolutely.
and then the Abrahamic religions, Judaism obviously has a very outsized influence based on the totals, but you take Christianity and Islam
Yeah.
and the influence that has on the planet, and then Christianity in terms of its own distortions bleeding into Rome,
Mhm.
who literally control time
Yep.
on this planet, in the artificial time, which
Sure.
is coming from Rome, which is based on the Old Testament.
Mhm.
So it's truly governing the whole planet. And in so many ways, we recognize that we're living in an inversion in different ways and these distortions. And how far back does the layers go?
Mhm.
And then it goes back to the seed, the source. And it's not that the Old Testament started human civilization, not that anything came before, but in this period of human civilization, if we wanted to look at something that kicked it off, that could probably be it.
Yeah.
And as somebody, as a Jew, um there's so many things that we get revered for, and two of them are, well, one of them is bringing light from the darkness, and the second is resilience.
Mhm.
And regarded for Judaism is celebrated for asking questions and wrestling with God. So you take all those things together, and where what I'm saying and what we're saying, but especially me from the seat I'm in, is so considered so blasphemous. I actually think that what I'm doing is representing the truth of Judaism and the tribe. I'm wrestling with God just as my ancestors did, but calling it out in a way that maybe they didn't before. And why did we become so adept at bringing light from darkness? Because we brought Judaism from the Old Testament.
Yeah. Right, right, right.
And so that is really, I'm like honoring Judaism. Look at
Sure.
how much light and beauty and teaching could be brought. The only difference is that I think that the ancestors and the sages and the rabbis were too afraid to actually call out and say, no, this is not God. Yahweh is not God. So instead, they said, no, 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 that's God. But you know what? Let's find something else from it. And they just like basically Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They made the most ornate, beautiful cage.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, it's tricky because yeah, when you're born in a particular tradition, especially one like in the history of Judaism that's going to get attacked by just about everyone around, of course the natural tendency is to close ranks and not necessarily give ammunition to the people on the outside who are waiting to criticize you and to crack down on you to give them ammunition for it.
Yeah.
You're like, no, 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 it's all great and wonderful. It's all because it feels like when you're in that kind of situation, it's kind of like even today when you look at politics, you're going to have somebody, doesn't even matter if it's left wing, right wing, somebody on an absolutely extreme fringe of the spectrum that's going to say something batshit crazy. And the other side is going to go, look at those guys, they are batshit crazy. It's going to be, oh, look at all those leftists, they're batshit crazy, or all the conservatives, they are all like this. And then immediately, if you are from the same side, your first instinct will be like, oh my God, I can't believe you said something so dumb. But now we have the other side attacking you and because you are on our side, so I guess we're gonna have to protect you, and I guess we're gonna have to almost start believing in this stuff and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where
Yes.
the batshit crazy versions become normative because you have had the other side attacking them, and oh, we
Yeah.
can't give a point to the other side, so we'll have to defend our own no matter how insane they are.
Yes.
Which of course is a terrible mentality, because if anything,
Yeah.
you should be the first to call out your own side and say, no, this is not what we are about. This is just stupid. Let's not go there. Let's not do this. But of course, there's that factionalistic mentality that makes you think, no, we have to close rank against all types of criticism. I think it's a terrible idea. It's a terrible strategy, first and foremost, never mind in terms of intellectual honesty, but it's also strategically just not very smart. Because I think so much more strength in being open, in saying, look, we believe in these things, but this one, even though it comes from our side, no, that's just flat out stupid. And we are going to be the first one to call it. And that way you take away the ammunition from the other side. But again, if you play it correctly, if you don't, it becomes more ammunition for the other side to go, oh, you see, they're all insane. They all believe that stupid stuff. And
and that's the classic divide and conquer, which is permeating this planet. And it's so fascinating to hear you talk about it too, because even just yesterday, we was at temple and we're having a meal, and I'm sitting with some people in the congregation, a little older folks, and happened to sit at a table with a gentleman who only watches, gets his information from Fox News, and with a couple women that get their information from NPR and the New York Times. And they're all friends with each other, but they're just throwing facts back and forth at each other. And the gentleman said to the women, you guys really need to watch something new. You need to change the station. And I'm thinking, same for him. I'm watching the same thing happening.
Of course.
And then they asked me my thoughts, and I'm usually hesitant to join, but I started to kind of share things like this. And it's that truth is greater than facts. And you can throw facts back and forth all along, but let's look at what's actually happening in the world today in Israel and in Gaza. And even something like that, is it a genocide? Is it just that's a big thing. Is it a genocide? Is it a genocide? And so we get arguing about that. And when we cut through it, what I was sharing with them was that we've killed tens of thousands of children. Okay. And then, oh no, but it was, but they use them as human shields, or no, it's an asynchronistic war, or I'm like, the fuck are you talking about? We're we're supposed to hold ourselves to a higher moral account.
Right.
We're supposed to hold our tribe, as you were saying. I believe we need to clean our own house. And so we're going to argue and try to find ways to justify, well, they did this and they did this, and this is the language, when we are accountable and responsible for killing tens of thousands of children. How can we be okay with that? And then you go back to the Old Testament. And so even if we've created all of this beauty, and even if we've created this religion, there's something that's seeped into our psyche, I believe, and into our blood, that we ultimately have this justification because of these stories that have been embedded. And it's more than just Judaism. And so we have to hold ourselves to account, though. But if we do, then we're afraid of, now all of a sudden we're siding with the other side. But I've come to the current belief, and I'd love to know your thought on this, that I'm a delusional optimist. And so, but I don't know that we'll ever be able to actually eradicate war on this planet until we call out the stories and the myths that have seeded our humanity and civilization for what they are. Otherwise, we're just growing fruit from a poisoned seed.
Agreed 100%. When the biggest religions in the world have at their core a theology of holy war, you don't go anywhere. It's just going to be, and don't get me wrong, it's not that without Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is all people hugging trees and communing with the furry creatures of the forest. Because, of course, there are atrocities that have been committed by everyone. Is not just a Judeo-Christian Islamic thing. However, having not only there are multiple reasons, but there's a tendency in humanity toward war and bloodshed, and there's some of that for sure. But to have a religious justification for it, to make that not just war, but holy war, yeah, that's something that should badly need to be addressed for sure. And along with that, I think connected with what you're saying is the idea of belonging. I find it scary to begin with, which is something that we all want to belong to something larger than ourselves. We always belong to tribes. We belong to extended family. And there was obviously it's what fed us, what made us us, there's something beautiful about it because we are social creatures. But belonging in the sense of becoming starting to bind this factionalistic myth of like there's us versus them. There's we need to. It kills any kind of honesty because at that point you stop looking in, like rather than looking at, you know what, this time those guys are right. They have a good point. Think about any political or philosophical ideology. You are supposed to believe that all the right answers are all within one school of thought.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, man. Have you ever looked at how life works? That's not how it works. Now, your school of thought can be amazing. Your school of thought can be brilliant. It can have a ton of stuff. But if by some miracle your school of thought gets it 75% right, that still means that there's 25% that you can learn from somebody else,
Exactly. Yes.
So this whole notion that, no, I'm supposed to defend the creed, the dogma, 101%, it's like, get out of here. That's how you stop being intellectually honest, because now you care about more scoring point for your side, whatever your side is, than you do about honesty, truth, and ultimately what works. Because my attitude is, I don't give a crap where an idea comes from. Does it work? Does it help people? Okay, then I like it. I'm interested. Show me how it. So the very idea, I mean, even the way we do politics is beyond stupid. There shouldn't be parties. There should be individuals who have one common goal, which is to make the nation work as best as humanly possible and to make the world work as best as humanly possible. One can have difference in strategy, but it's not a difference in I need to oppose everything you say. It's like, I actually think that this approach is going to work better. You think this one, let's look at the evidence. Okay, we still can't agree after looking at the evidence. Let's try some experiments. Let's test it out. Oh, turns out I think I still was mostly right, but a little tweak in your direction actually helps more than just my position. That's how you do stuff, Very just, who cares what my ideas are? What counts is which ideas are going to deliver results in a healthy way. The end. If somebody else says either their idea or at least part of their idea shows promise, use it. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
But of course, you can't do it the moment you go by these it's our side versus their side. Now, they have to be wrong 100% of the time, and there's nothing ever that you can learn about it. And I'm like, take the most horrible ideologies on earth. And of course, you don't justify them, but if you look deep down, there's probably a 0.5% of something where you go, you know what, that makes sense. Or, they take it to a place that's really unhealthy, but the original grievance is legitimate. I can see why somebody would have that issue, which doesn't mean you justify where they take it. If you look at, like, I don't know, something, the Nazis, we all agree, horrible stuff. We can look at just about everything about the Nazi program and go, wow, this is atrocious. Whoa, this is even worse. This is beyond terrible. But if you look at something like how Germany got screwed over by the Treaty of Versailles, well, that is a legitimate grievance. They did get screwed over. They were put in a position that was pretty much impossible. So the fact that ordinary Germans were looking for some way out of a perceived insult, Okay, I can see the logic to that. Now,
Yeah.
from there to supporting Hitler, that's a big jump where I think, like, what the
Yeah.
hell did you guys do? But even something like this, even just acknowledging that somebody may have a legitimate grievance,
Yeah.
even if you don't agree with where they go with it, at least do that, Jesus. But no, it's never, it's always like, we are
Yeah.
right, we are wrong, 100% to 0%. I'm like,
I
it's
love
not,
that you brought that up because the I tend to use Hitler or the Holocaust in terms of examples because I think it's helpful to use blatantly extreme examples
yep.
because then as everything is within it. And I had a heart to heart, like a long conversation with our rabbi this past week because I've decided after my son's bar mitzvah, I'm not going to be a member of the temple anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel good to me. And it's great people and I still want to come around and do things, but
Yeah,
like, I can't go every week and kiss the book. I
yeah,
can't keep doing that. And so we, had a very open conversation and maybe, obviously disagreeing in some ways. And I brought up the example of, when we can look at people that are so obviously exactly what you're saying could be so atrocious, but there could be positives there that can we look at that and it's the inversion that really, really good people can also do
yeah,
atrocious things. And can we call it out? And I brought up the example with the Nazi party that Hitler was actually a really great environmentalist.
sure. Yeah, exactly. Where you can say, it doesn't mean I appreciate the other
Yeah,
98%, but that
yeah.
percent made sense,
It may,
Yeah,
and animal rights,
yeah, of course,
all,
of course. Yeah.
and so it's so reductive. Now it would, if we could say a fact that if I were to say that I'm really for environmental and animal rights,
Hmm.
that somebody could say, "Oh, what are you, a Nazi?"
Right. Yeah,
And it's like that would be factually true
sure, of
in
course.
that limited context, and all the same, I want to be able to bring it up, and it's not in no way, shape, or form justifies
Oh,
any of
of
the
course.
things that we have to say that, but because we're in such a polarized, divisive
Hmm.
container and taught that it has to be one or the other, that if you even sniff at it, all of a sudden you're now outcast.
Yeah.
And I experienced that the first time I experienced it really clearly was in 2016
Hmm.
when it was Hillary was running against Trump.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a Jew from LA. You can
Hmm.
imagine how I grew up politically.
Sure, of course.
Blue and blue through
Yeah.
and through. You don't even think about it. And I'm now starting to you know, learn more about what's actually happening in politics and starting to see more things about Hillary that don't feel so good.
Sure.
A lot of blood on her hands and other things. And so I'm starting to have conversations, just bringing it up with my friends and like my tribe.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, I never knew this did you know this about her and stuff? And what did I get? Oh, you're a fan of Trump? Oh, you like Trump? Well, what about Trump? Are you Trump? And I was like, what are you
Yeah.
talking? I'm not
Yeah.
even talking about Trump. Like here, and then I got outcast for
Of course.
wanting to shine a light on my own
Yep.
tribe.
Absolutely. And usually what happens is, I mean, that also has been the Joe Rogan trajectory, right? He was like a Bernie Sanders guy, and then he start criticizing certain things on the left. He gets a ton of pushback from the left, and the right goes, "Come here, we'll hug you and hold you." And
Yeah.
so each day it's one more step because it's like these guys support me and these guys are yelling at me, even though technically I'm more with these guys. So I think I'm now I think if you're smart, you don't necessarily go the other route. You just go, okay, these guys were criticizing me as assholes because I'm just bringing up issues. I'm not questioning the best, like certain things we agree on. And it doesn't mean that it make the other guys good guys. But I think it's natural to go where you are more loved than when you're not.
Yeah.
Even though, I mean, there's a skit that's like an hilarious skit by, I forget the comedian's name, but he was brilliant. He was like, why being a left, it is exhausting. And he goes into like, being right wing is easy. It's like, do you like Trump? Yes. Are you against abortion? Yes. Do you hate the gays? No. They're like, it's okay. You can learn. Don't worry. You're a MAGA hat. You're one of us. It's all good.
Yeah. You still like guns though, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So we're good. Whereas the other one was like, are you pro LGBTQ? Yes. Are you this? Yes. And he goes through the list of 15 things. And then he's like, are you vegan? He's like, no. And it's like, well, then why don't you join the rest of the fucking Nazis? Perfect. Because it's exactly how it
It's
works.
completely my lived experience.
Yeah, 100%. And I think
100%.
it's so stupid. It's so stupid because to me, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why when like talking politics, nobody likes me because I don't go along with any, like I
Yeah.
can have certain things that I dislike more than others, but it's like, yeah, if you make me look at Hillary Trump, it's like, shoot me now, or no, shoot them now, don't shoot me, but like, it's like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? This is the choice I get. It's like, it's atrocious. Now, if you really have to play the game of lesser of two evil, I'm going to look at the evidence and pick what I think is lesser of two evil. But in no way, shape, or form, not only does it mean I like one of them, but it means I probably despise both of them. It's just to what degree? Is it to 88% or is it in 99.9,
Yeah.
That's where it's at. And so to me, like,
Exactly.
pretend that no, I have to like it. I shouldn't see all the things that are wrong on one side. It's like, get out of here, It's like very. So of course and it's funny because when you, like you said, it's like when you criticize one side, they immediately go, oh, so that means you love, and it's like, no, I dislike that side even more possibly, but doesn't mean I don't see the problems here,
Yeah.
And I think that's
And I
that.
got that with my rabbi, and I get where it's coming from, like the fear, and that's
Yeah.
part that is the tribalism and its survival. And he was saying he was, genuinely concerned, if I leave the temple, what about my kids?
Mhm.
Because also I live in Texas now. I live in
Yep.
Dallas now, and my kids, they're like the only Jewish kids at their school.
Mhm.
They go to a public school, and it's not an issue. Like I've never, you know, they've never had any issues with it. But like we need to seek Judaism
Yeah.
here. It's not just
Yeah,
around.
yeah.
And so, like the rabbi shared, he's like, well, look, if the anti-Semitism is on the rise
Mhm.
more now than ever before, and giving me these statistics and the kids. And I was like, well, no shit. Look what the fuck we're doing. Why don't we because we're not calling out our own.
Yep. Of
I would
course.
be against me too if I'm going to be defending these atrocities that are these happening here.
And I think that becomes the problem. That is like people conflate stuff. So it's like I think Netanyahu is an asshole and some policies there are atrocious. That doesn't mean you should jump to, oh, then Jews are evil. It's like, what the hell? How did you make that jump? It's like
Yeah.
criticizing a government, but it goes both ways because sometimes when you are not in any way, shape, or form criticizing Jewish people, but you say, oh, this policy by the Israeli government is crap, it becomes, oh, you're anti-Semitic. And it's like, no, not at all. Or not even, no, no, no. But how the hell me saying that a government policy is bad means I'm anti-Semitic? It's like, what are you talking about? And
Yeah.
so it cuts both ways. And it's such a dumb game. It's such a dumb game. In like, in an ideal world, I like the notion of this identity. Everybody loves this notion of identity, whether it's ethnic, religious, sexual, whatever. I'm just like, To me, identity is a prison. To me, it's a cage that people stick to because they are afraid to venture out on their own. And so you need this belonging to something that's going to give you a full sense of security. To me, is how free inquiry, it's where free inquiry goes to die. It's where real intellectual curiosity goes to die. To me, it's like, no, I am from Italy. There's a ton of stuff I don't like about Italy. There's stuff I like. I'll keep the stuff I like. I'll let go the stuff I don't. I'm a male. There's stuff that I like about being a man. There's stuff about how men behave that I think is gross. I'll keep the good stuff and reject the others. I'm 10,000 things, but I don't want to be the poster boy for any one of them. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want to. So to me, it's like, at least according to me, I'm not an idiot. So I like to think that I can make choices where I can pick the good and the bad in certain things and mix it into my own unique mix of who I am as an individual. I don't know why
I don't know either, but that was the universe saying that you just hit a point. We're gonna have to go back, and whatever you just said was so poignant and so tapped in with source that God literally threw fireworks behind you to elucidate that you had touched something that was so profound and so aligned.
Awesome.
You didn't even do. I don't know how. I have no idea why I did that. I don't know.
Kind of motion with the hands that triggered it, but that was funny.
But you weren't being Italian. You were just sitting there.
Yeah.
The veil is getting very thin.
Yep.
Right. So, yeah.
I think so. Here is the problem, though, because we agree on that concept, right? Why is it that most people don't live that way? Why is it? Because it's hard. It's really damn hard because you have to be pretty self-confident to be able to make your own call on every single issue without relying on whatever your tribe believes. You need to be able to trust yourself. You need to feel that you are smart enough to make good choices. You need to be confident enough to feel that you are ready to change your mind whenever the evidence shows otherwise. You need to be constantly aware, constantly on the lookout, because the reality is that whatever idea you come up with that works may not work in a different context, in a different situation. So you have to be, it's exhausting for most people. It's like, just give me 5 simple things to believe and leave me alone. I'll use that as an answer to any issue that ever comes in my life. And I don't have to think so damn hard. Never mind the fact that life is scary and terrifying in lots of ways. So it would feel better if I had the backing of like some 5,000-year-old tradition, or at least a ton of people who are all screaming the same slogan, So it's hard on a self-esteem level. It's hard on how much work it requires level. So I understand why most people don't go that route. I think it makes sense.
Yeah. Although it's hard on the ego, but I guess the alternative when we say we make our own choices, if we were just I and my Father are one.
Yeah.
And in the receptivity of true source and allowing that guidance to come through, it could probably argue there's nothing easier.
It's funny that you say that, because there's a line in the Tao Te Ching that I love because it's so funny, where it says, "My way is very easy to understand and very easy to practice, but nobody understands it and nobody practices it." Which is a bit of a joke, but it's driving the point that yes, in theory, it's easy. In theory, it's easy if you are sensitive, caring, curious, intelligent, work hard. If you do all this stuff, piece of cake. But it's not exactly easy in that sense, which is the reason why in many cases Taoist schools would not, whereas most philosophical approaches tend to want people to, either in religions, to convert or to more people to follow. A standard Taoist thing is like, you sure you want to bother with this stuff? Because just go to Confucianism. They'll give you 7 simple rules and, prevent you from doing too much damage. And maybe that's good enough, because this is hard work. Do you really want to do that?
So let's talk about timing of things with humanity, because obviously the Abrahamic religions have the most influence on the planet as a whole, but not in total.
Sure.
And they tend to almost deny the existence of Eastern religions.
Sure, absolutely.
When they look at like history, or we're the first to do this, and then it's like, well, what about Hinduism or Confucianism or whatnot? So, can you share a little bit about parallel timelines? I'm curious. If
you look at everybody on Earth, every single population on Earth, at one point or another, was some form of animism or shamanism, or however you want to call it. Basically this belief that the universe is alive, that there are spirits that are spirits of nature, there are spirits that don't have a physical body but you can interact with. There's a power that you can tap into, a la Star Wars in a way, but that's where they got the concept for Star Wars. That there are people who are more. So that stuff is at the roots of every single religion there is. We all come from a tribal background. We all come from that stuff. Then eventually, as society moved away from small bands of hunters and gatherers and became farming villages and so on, you start seeing the same beliefs becoming more institutional. So with more of a priesthood rather than the shaman, the rituals now are done in the same way every time. These personification of natures got stories and are codified in a more rigid type of way. And then from there, you go and pick up everything else develops from that type of stuff. So to me, as far as timing, that's the religion before religion. That's what existed for the majority of time we were alive as human beings. After that, if you look at, Hinduism is a classic form of that type of stuff, where you go from an animistic beliefs to this more organized, various gods, powers of nature type of stuff. And Hinduism is extremely ancient. How ancient, again, you go so far back in time that it's kind of like saying how ancient Judaism is. It's so far back that there are disagreements about when stuff happened, because of course we don't have that much confirmation for precise dates. But they are both insanely ancient, thousands and thousands of years. Then when you look at, like in Asia, for example, most of the time you had you have Buddhism popping out of Hinduism in the 500s before Common Era. So that's about 2,500 years old, a little more, almost 26. From there, then you see even schools like Taoism or Confucianism, they emerge maybe about 2,400 years ago, give or take. And they start more as philosophy than anything, and then they get mixed with Chinese animism, and they can take a more religious form as well. But some people will look at them purely as philosophy, some people purely as religion, some people as both, but that's kind of how it works. Same thing as like if you look in Japan, Shintoism. Shinto is basically Japanese form of animism. So much so that they don't have an issue with mixing with other traditions. That's why when Buddhism arrives, you would have temples where Buddhism and Shintoism was practiced in the same temple, because they didn't see a conflict with it. It was like, oh, it's another path. Oh, that ritual is actually cool. We'll do that too. There was this mixing of ideas, because there wasn't the belief that there's only one is right. And it's the same thing why even in ancient China, people sometimes practice Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism at the same time. Like the same person would be Taoist, Confucianist, and Buddhist. Because it's like, oh, Confucianism works well for the ethical rules. I like that stuff. But I like Taoist mysticism and Buddhism. They each had their strength, and people would freely mix. Not everybody, of course, there are also stories that are of clashing, but for the most part, there was this attitude of shopping cart approach to religion. I'll take whichever stuff works for me in a particular facet of my life. So with that, there have been these, some of these Eastern traditions are definitely Most of them, well, several of them are younger than Judaism, but older than Christianity and Islam. Unless you consider Hinduism, then you go around the same. And then if you consider animism, well, that's the ancestor for everybody, for
Right.
the Asians as well as the Western ones.
Well, I hear a lot in that sharing. The frame that I come to so much is the blind men and the elephant.
Sure, of course.
And, we tend to complete that parable of just teaching that, it all depends on your perspective, but it's all true. But I think the next step that we don't talk about is we sort of assume that all the blind men are fighting. The parable talks how they're fighting. But what happens when they all come and sit around the fire and say, well, this was oh, no, interesting. Because what I experienced was so different.
Absolutely.
And I sense that this is that part of our story as humans that we're just entering into, is those of us blind men that are saying, you know what, let's actually go talk. I'm interested. Tell me about it. Let's come together and piece it together, because we all agree there's just one elephant. And so how do we put that together? And this seems to be the choice point where we are at humanity now, that there are, I'm sure there always were, but more and more people are waking up to the recognition that there's just one elephant and that we don't want to fight against each other. Even this conversation that we're having here, where so many people would attack us. And we have, I'm sure I've been attacked individually. I said the same thing at that lunch yesterday that you said on this call, is that both sides now disagree with me.
Of course.
But it's so interesting because we're actually agreeing with them in the ways that are most resonant. So what do we do do we just keep doing what we do? Do we just keep doing our best and holding down the fort of the good, the holy and the beautiful? Or is there something there's the part of me that wants those of us with this view to come together, but then do we just perpetuate the same type of individuated thing of tribalism?
So that's exactly why that old model is powerful, and what we are advocating is difficult. I'm not saying it's weak or is impossible, but it's difficult, because it's very easy to create a church, a religion, a philosophy around a core set of dogmas. We are all going to wear these colors, and we are going to have the creed, and we are going to have our flag, and we're going to have, but of course you become just like that approach that we're just saying is blind and ultimately not very fulfilling. If you're going to have, how do you create an open-minded, open-ended approach? Approach easy, but how do you create, you don't create an identity based on that. You know what I mean? Because there's going to be the other guy who chooses some of the stuff resonate. He's going to hop on board, and then you're going to look 5 minutes later and you're like, whoa, your ideas are so damn different from mine on so many issues. And in many cases, there will be a clash, because now you have a label, and now it's like, oh, you guys are all like that guy. And I'm like, no, we're not like that guy. That's just that guy. It's like, but it becomes like, how do you enforce? You don't. Of course, the answer is you don't. You don't enforce orthodoxy in something that by definition is not supposed to be even orthodoxy, where you have supposed to have this more open-ended game. I think it's about, it's the reason why, if you publish a book or you create a genre of music, the first thing that a label or a publisher will ask you is, what the genre here? In what piece of the bookstore do we put it? Under what division do we put it on Spotify? If you don't fit in, they don't know what to do with you. Because it's like, well, it's kind of a little of this, but it's also that. It's like, people are not going to find you because they are looking for that one thing. And if you're not have a label on, you're going to be hard to. So I think there's, I think it should be done. I think there's a marketing problem. It's very hard to be recognized when you're in a way abandoning identity, moving beyond it. and also have an understanding that just because that guy abandoned certain identities, I abandoned certain identities, doesn't mean we are one. His conclusions may be radically different from mine, and that's part of the game. So it's like it's easy to create identities. How do you create a disidentity? And where it's a great question you ask, and I don't think there's a simple answer.
And then even with that, how do you not create an identity around disidentity?
Absolutely, exactly, because it's like, oh, you're the guy who's always flexible. Like, one of the things that I say sometimes in regard to Taoism that I think is funny is the idea that I don't believe there are no absolutes except when there are.
Yeah. Yeah.
90% of the time, most things are relative. They are contextual. There are no absolute rules. In some cases, there are absolute rules. To me, it's like an example that I used once when I podcasted with Aubrey was the idea of, I have a fairly flexible morality when it comes to a lot of things, but there are a few things on which there are no exceptions. There's no flexibility. There's no self-defense rape. You know what I mean? Rape is evil 101% of the time under all circumstances. There's no way to spin it. So most of the time, even think about something like killing somebody. It's terrible, of course, in most cases, unless it's self-defense, unless it's, there are some unless, so it makes it contextual. Rape, there is no contextual. It's bad, period, in all circumstances. Child abuse is bad in all circumstances. There are a few things that are bad. But, I think it's important to remember, because people are like, we believe in absolutes. No, we don't. But that becomes its own absolute, as you're saying. So to even have the mental flexibility to say, no, I don't think absolute works most of the time, but occasionally they do.
Yeah.
That's another layer.
And then we get caught in that game because someone can hear that, and as much truth as there does exist in the saying, there are no absolutes. That's a fascinating grammatical statement. There's only 4 words that in and of it's impossible for that to exist because it contradicts itself by the nature of its own existence.
Absolutely. I think that's what's funny. I think that's the joke about it,
Yeah, but then what do we do? And then we just get caught in that, and then everybody just keeps on raping and killing. We're like, it's genocide. No, it's not genocide. No, it's homicide. No, it's not homicide. It's self-defense. No, it's this. And while we're just and I love language, but while we get lost in that, the thing that we actually care about continues to get perpetuated because we're unable to provide the contextual frame that satisfies our desire for compartmentalization.
We can wrap with a proposal that will please everybody. We'll solve all the world conflicts. We'll get the Nobel Peace Prize. And ready? It's the idea that I pitch called Gladiators for World Peace. My idea is, you hate these guys for whatever reason. They hate you for whatever reasons. Great. I don't need to convince you guys that it's stupid, that you should look the odds. I know it's not going to happen. So let's get you guys in the Coliseum. I'll hand you a sword. I'll hand them a sword. And you leave all the damn civilians out of it. No kids get killed. No civilians get. The only people who fight are the ones who want to fight. That's it. No collateral damage. No. We'll have gladiatorial games for world peace, and you guys can happily kill each other for whatever ideological reason you think is valid, and the rest of us can have a beer and watch it on pay-per-view, or decide that it's gross and disgusting, not watch it, and do other stuff while you guys are killing each other away from everyone else and not causing trouble for everyone else.
Yeah.
Because, if Hamas and some hard line on the Israeli side want to kill each other in a cage, be my guest. Just don't kill that, just don't kill kids. That would be a nice start.
Yeah. And that's the thing when I have these conversations with these people in my congregation, good, decent, moral people. And when I say we're killing tens of thousands of children, that anything would be said after that. it just shows this disconnection
Yeah.
from our humanity that like we should acknowledge it and we should cry.
Mm-hmm.
We could, and I sensed when I was talking with my rabbi, I could see this emotion starting to pop up in his eyes. But then as soon as I said something about the Holocaust or Nazis, it was so easy for him to turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, I don't agree with that, or that I don't accept that. And it's like gone.
Yeah, of course.
And even with that, what I come back to as a product of I lost my dad. My grandfather was one of 11 and 2 survived. Okay. So, I mean, I'm direct, but for us to dismiss it and just say it's all evil, there were a lot, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of really, really good moral Nazis.
Of course. Of course.
Mothers and grandmothers and husbands and children that were part of this larger system and this institution, that some of them were really strongly for it and some of them weren't. And a lot of them probably didn't know what was happening. And I think now with the amount of access that we have in the world, that there's still a lot of people and a lot of Jews that don't know what's actually happening. So how are people supposed to know in 1940 and 1939 what's actually happening of the truth? And they still are think because of the little segment they get that what they're doing is positive. And one of the gentlemen that I had the conversation with yesterday said, but this is how humanity's been for 6,000 years and forever. And I was like, I know. That doesn't mean we have to keep perpetuating it.
Absolutely.
When are we going to call it out?
Yeah.
You know, what's it going to take? What's it going to take for us to just like actually acknowledge? Like, what's it going to take for, I would just so love a staunch religious Jew to say, yes, that is wrong for us to kill 20,000 children. Can we start with that?
Yeah, it's a low bar. You would think that would be
it's a pretty low bar. Yeah.
No, it's terrifying. It is terrifying because there's always a way to rationalize it. There's always a way to spin it. I mean, even if like the random German who's kind of Nazi, but not that hardcore, but probably even if they knew exactly what was happening in the middle of the Holocaust, would probably go, you know, it's terrible. I understand. These are kids that die. But, you know, these people are ruining our lives. They are the ones who have been so it's almost a self-defense thing. And I mean, yeah, it's to be regretted in the great scheme of things. But you know what? If our proud German people are to thrive, unfortunately, and I feel horrible, but, you know, this is probably what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And you're going to be like, oh, Jesus, you know.
I heard the term with my rabbi. I'd never heard it before. And he said to me, look, yes, absolutely. It's an asynchronistic war. Have you ever heard that term before?
Maybe once or twice, yeah.
I'd never heard it before, that conversation.
Yeah.
So it's new for me. And if you as studied as you are, I've only heard it a couple times, that it's just the latest verbal jargon to create justification in the minds of moral people. That I would hear that from, and when he said it, I like accepted it just to like, and then after the call, I'm driving home and I was starting, it was landing with me. I was like, the Holocaust was that was pretty asynchronistic.
Absolutely.
So the fact that you would say that as a justification is just as valid for Nazis to say it as a justification.
Yeah, I'm sure you're real popular in some.
I know. I don't have these conversations too publicly in my shul, and I'm even waiting to share them too much publicly until after my son's bar mitzvah.
Yeah, good idea.
But like, I'm so deeply, and if there's one thing I want, if there's one thing I'm deeply committed to, is peace.
Yeah.
It's this is I have this
Yeah.
is the banner of peace. I don't know if you know this symbol. I have it. Yeah. So um ultimately it's what I want.
Mhm.
It's what I want for my children. It's what I want for humanity. And these conversations can be challenging and difficult and polarizing, but that's what we're all going towards. And so if we could wrap all of this into something, especially, it's beautiful. The impetus of our conversation to come together was to talk about the Tao. And although we didn't talk about it directly, I feel like
Sure.
we've been in a Taoist discourse this whole
Sure.
time. We didn't have to, call out the kids. Like we came to talk about the ocean, and
Yeah.
we've been talking about fish, and we've been talking about, things. So I would love to come back from this. I mean, and then even the impetus with that, when you gave this really epic discourse on the Tao. And my question to you was, I had been in this contemplation of not what is it to find the balance, but to be the line on the outside. And there's actually a name for that, which I had heard recently. Um, so maybe there's something, again, I just want to tee that off, whatever's there for you, bringing it into the wisdom of the Tao or not, but us as, humans and our intentions for wanting peace, to piece the whole elephant together,
Yeah.
recognizing the duality, the challenge within it, and the paradox wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in all of it. What what do we do? What do we do with all it, man? How do we actually get to experience the kingdom and the beloved community and that heaven on earth that we know is present with all of our knowledge and all of the distortion? What do we do?
I think it's a dance at the end of the day. It's a dance philosophically, it's a dance about never getting too comfortable with a hardline position, being able to flow, to see different things, to borrow different ideas, to change as things inevitably always change. And at the same time, to ground it in some practices that are not ideological, to have things where your neighbors come to visit you to have a sauna together, and that's its own ritual. Is it religious? It's life, yeah, it's to the religion of life in that sense. Is you sweat together, you go play a game together, you create music together, you anything that bring people together in a healthy way where good energies exchange and nobody else is not against somebody else is a good move. Anything that moves vital energy is good. Anything that So I think there are, yeah, while philosophically may get easy to get lost, you can also ground it in just at the end of the day, there are things that make us human on a practical level.
Mm,
Feed your neighbors with good food. It's never a bad idea. It's like offering somebody some good food, inviting them over to eat something good. I don't need to share your ideology. I don't need to share your religion. I don't need to share whatever. If you are a halfway decent person, we can sit down together and have a meal. Doesn't mean we're going to agree maybe on who you're going to vote for or something, but it at least grounds it in some basic level of humanity that transcends ideology. So that maybe, just maybe, the day when you are carrying the pitchfork and the torch and saying, we need to burn all of those guys, you remember, well, those guys technically fit, my neighbor technically fit in that group, but we get along. He's a nice guy. He helped my kids. Maybe let me rethink this for a second.
yeah.
That's the ideal. There's a great story of, I forget the guy's name, it's a musician, African American musician who befriended KKK members. And
Mm,
eventually, one by one, he got a ton of people out of the KKK because they couldn't reconcile anymore this ultra racist ideology with the fact that they liked this guy, that this guy was a good guy.
yeah.
He tripped their circuits that way. I think that's the most beautiful thing that anyone can do.
I love that is there's something about the circuitry is the unlearning
Yep.
and the deprogramming
Yep.
that we do, which there's a paradox that feels very Taoist here for you as a teacher.
Mhm.
And so how we teach to unlearn, and then, but also we're filling ourselves with knowledge. We're filling ourselves with history. We're filling ourselves with philosophy while at the same time deprogramming.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
how do those things work together?
I think at the end of the day, it's like in like Zen Buddhism, they have this idea of 3 stages of knowledge, where at the first stage you are very spontaneous, but you're also ignorant. So it's a spontaneity that there's something cool about it, but it's also born from ignorance, which is not so cool. Then there's a learning stage where you start learning all these things and you accumulate knowledge. And now it's cool because you are no longer ignorant, but it's not so cool because you're losing any kind of spontaneity that makes you human in a way. And in many cases, this is where it ends. You're either ignorant or you are knowledgeable by your. And in the Zen Buddhist thing, which Taoism borrows as well, is the idea there's a third stage, which is where you return to simplicity, which is like, wait,
Mm,
why did I do all this work if I'm going to go back to the first point? You're not
mm,
exactly to the same point. You're spontaneous again, and you shed the excess baggage of knowledge, all the, rather than carrying knowledge in your head like stones that you have to carry with you, is something that is embodied knowledge, is what you needed to absorb, you have absorbed it, the rest you let go of the heaviness. And so you can have something that's not ignorant and yet is spontaneous and in touch with vitality.
mm.
I think that's the way you want to approach it.
I love that. That third way that you talk about is something that has been such a deep teaching for me, and I see it in so many different ways. And the first frame of reference that I had with that third way was with the parable with the Buddha's 3 levels of students.
Mhm.
And if you're about when he died, have you heard this one? Well, so the Buddha has 3. Oh my gosh, I got goosies now, man. This is like one of my I feel it coming through the depth of this, that
Yeah,
there's no fireworks happening behind, but I haven't said anything yet. I'm feeling it internally. So I love that you haven't heard this, that I get to tell this to you for the first time. Because I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm so interested to see what you're going to say. So the Buddha has 3 different levels of students: the beginning, the intermediate, and the advanced. And when he died, all of the beginning students cried. And they cried because they didn't know the true nature of reality, and they were still connected into,
yeah,
the temporal, and his teacher was gone, and so what are they going to do? The intermediate students, they didn't cry.
of course. Yeah, it's
And
the same thing. It's the same thing.
right. And so they didn't cry because they actually knew, and he didn't really go, and he didn't go anywhere. So what did the advanced students do? They cried.
Of course. It's the same, it's the return to that level, but in a different
Yeah.
way. Yeah, totally. It's exactly that is the specific example of that same idea of the 3 stages, right? It's the
Yes.
exact same thing.
And
And
it's so beautiful.
yeah,
When I really tap into the beauty of it, and I'm getting really emotional about it now, because I've asked this parable to a lot of people,
mhm,
and only one person has ever actually answered it.
right.
And it was a guy named John Robbins, who you may know of. He wrote Diet for a New America,
Mm,
a real luminary. Anyway, he was just a beautiful man that became a good friend and mentor, an incredible story. And big heart. He was the heir apparent, I'll tell you briefly, heir apparent to the Baskin Robbins empire.
Oh, yeah. I think you even mentioned it in
I
a
probably
call.
mentioned him
Yeah,
on one of our calls anyway. But so this guy, right? Just this is, and I remember not long before he passed, I shared this parable with him, and I told him, and I said, and then the advanced students, and I said, what did the advanced students do? And he answered it just like this. He just looked at me and he said, they cried.
of course.
But like he knew.
Yeah, of course.
And I've never experienced that with anybody. And now I attach that with such a purity of heart to understand that from the
Yeah,
depth of it.
yeah,
That's the depth of getting beyond the language, beyond the absolute of like, of course rape is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Of course it's a genocide that's happening. Of course they cried. But there's this piece where we need to feel it. And
Yeah.
then for myself, something that I've framed and share with my own, teachings and clients, these 3 stages, that the first stage, we're a human being doing.
Yeah.
And that's how we get through our existence, through our actions. The second stage is we're a spiritual being. And a
Right.
lot of us think, oh, now that's the awakened stage. But the third stage, as you said, the word is the embodiment. And that's what I say, we're a spiritual being doing.
Yeah.
And the combination of them both. And so I think we're all entering that spiritual being doing phase now.
Yeah, because that ping pong game between, at the end of the day, limited ideas gets tedious really fast.
Yeah.
It's about being spontaneous. No, it's about knowledge. You're ignorant. No, it's about crying because I feel sad. No, it's about not crying because you should understand the truth. It's like, you guys get tired. It's
Yeah. Can we just cry?
yeah, exactly.
Because that's the human experience.
There's that guy there. That's one is a painting that my lady did of my favorite. This is a Zen master named EQ from the 1400s. And he was notorious for his main passions were Zen, drinking, and women. And the thing with him was the rejection of the sacred versus profane dichotomy. It's like, oh, the masses enjoy sex and drinking, whereas we enlightened monks are beyond that. And he was exactly that. He's like, he went through the whole process and he's like, but you know what? I kind of like to get buzzed and get it on with my lady. It's like,
Yeah.
and it's the same thing about those levels. And I think and I like many of those guys who did it by hiding because you're not supposed to, because, it's like, it was a weakness because it meant you were going back to ignorance. He's like, come on, guys, let's be real here.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think even the fact that we're having this conversation and having this context and here and seeing these things is allowing us and the ability to start to come together. And I can speak from my own personal experience and my own learnings that God has continued to turn the heat up on experiences. And so it's like, when are you going to fucking learn this lesson? How hot do I need to turn it up for you until you actually learn it? And I think we're experiencing it on the global level too, where it's like, how crazy and obvious do I need to make things for you until you actually just break down and call it for what it is? But that's the part too where a lot of people are hesitant with plant medicine. And I think it's the same thing with this, is because there's a lot of Jews in the conversation we've been having that aren't going to call it out because they don't want to deal with the truth of accepting the deplorableness of what's happening right now. It's too hard to face the atrocities head on that they have to continue to justify it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And as collectively, but we have to, be able to call it out. And I know, shoot, man, I'm just even seeing the time. I want to be respectful of that too, with that I could talk to you for like 9 more hours, but maybe I want to leave with something with that you can, if you want to tie it together, and we'll talk so much more, man. This was epic. What would you share to someone where we can intellectually think, yeah, I could call it out, but I think we have to get to a point where we feel it into that embodied state of it. And for a lot of people, they're afraid. They don't want to touch that. Is there teachings from you personally, from the Tao or wisdoms within that can give to somebody who's like, I know that's right, but I don't want to do it. I'm scared.
I mean, I think there are 2 levels to that. One is that I think anyone who doesn't want to open up is not going to open up. Doesn't matter what you say, doesn't matter. There's a point where there's a choice that individuals make. whether to open a door or to keep it closed. And there's only so much you can do to just kick it open. It's like at some point is a personal choice. On the other level, I think there's something about what are you afraid of? That thing that you're afraid to lose is it's just a cage. And you know what? Don't even, if you're afraid, that's okay. It's kind of like you don't want to jump into the water because it's scary. That's fine. Gently climb down the boat with the ladder and hang on to the boat. See how that feels. Test it out. Just go this much beyond your comfort zone, not more than that. Because if the alternative is I stay on the boat or I jump into this dark ocean, maybe I don't want to jump. No. That doesn't have to be the alternative. Maybe we can just get your feet in the water. Maybe you get to your knees. Maybe if you are not afraid, jump. But if you are afraid, that's totally cool. Understandable. Life is scary. No blame for being afraid.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, if nothing else, just even to make sure that your stance is the right one. Test out this much of what it feels like to step outside of that stance. And then see if you're not going to lose anything. If you decide, I don't like it, you go back. That's fine. Maybe, just maybe you realize, you know what, this doesn't suck. Let me try another inch. Let's see how that goes.
I love that. And I'm feeling the desire here, and something we could talk about more of, like creating these containers, these safe spaces for people to be able to do it. But even if it's just in conversation, and I think with me going back with my tribe and having these things without blame, without, attack, just say, can we just do this? Can you acknowledge the fact that we've killed tens of thousands of children? Can you put your foot in the water and say that that's not a positive thing? Let's start with the obvious. Can we just acknowledge, can we have some love and some grief for that? Just allow that, not about the hostages, not about the safety, but can we start? That's the foot in the water. Start with the big things, and then go from there.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. Have that tiny little step. It's like, yeah, we all agree. I mean, you agree, I agree. Of course, we agree that killing kids is not good. I don't even have to ask you. That's a given because you're a decent person.
Yeah.
Given that killing kids is no good, what do you think? Is there something that we can do not to kill kids, perhaps? Is there a strategy that would allow us to be consistent with our values here? Or are we going to raise the white flag, or no, sorry, we got to kill kids, that's it? Maybe that's the conclusion you will come to, but can we try to see if there's a way not to go there? Because clearly, I know your values. Obviously, you don't want to kill kids. So let's see. Let's test it out.
I tell you, we can't end this conversation talking about killing children.
So you should see my poor family, the stuff that they have to hear all the time. I'll be like in the middle of lunch and I'll tell the most horrific stories from history on a regular.
I'd say, you know what I wanted to, I wanted to, we can we'll bring a little bit of levity into here, which I just thought to share something maybe to tie it together. I don't know if you were on the call when a few weeks ago, about a month ago, I shared that I had been making these satirical, religious kind of novelty things.
Yeah, actually, it was more than a month ago. Yeah,
it was more than a month ago. Like, my two biggest influences in my life are Martin Luther King and Weird Al Yankovic, right? And so
influences,
something in between that. And so I'd been making some of these satirical things, and I shared one on my Instagram, and it caught fire. It's got like 350,000 views or something insane like that.
Yeah.
And people were asking for t-shirts. So I did a lifelong, I always wanted to create novelty shirts long before I had any type of spiritual thing. So I created a spiritual novelty swag store.
Oh, that's awesome. That's hilarious.
So I was going to share, you know what, I could look it up and bring it on to here, but Actually, if you have 1 minute, I want to end with this. I'm going to see if I can find it. One of the designs that I would love to get your input, your thoughts on from, we can look at I just got to pull it up here, figure out how to, okay. Give me 1 second. I think there's something about that. And even maybe as I'm pulling this up, you can talk about what is the role of humor? How important is we talk about the sweat, we talk about the acknowledgement, we talk about the tears, but how necessary, if at all, or important is the humor and the levity in the face of the atrocities?
That's huge. I'm actually going to send you something as soon as we finish. I'll send you a PDF of a book I wrote a while back, properly called Create Your Own Religion, which has a chapter entirely on laughter, on humor, on which is like, wait, what? I thought we were talking about religion. How does laughter fit into this? And I'm like, it's at the core of it all, because laughter is what keeps dogma at bay. If you're able to laugh at the stuff you hold sacred, you are more likely not to turn it into a dogma that means I need to kill people who don't worship it or some kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Laughter makes life so much easier to deal with the heaviness and the tragedies of life. Laughter to me is the highest form of wisdom. It's medicine. There are a million reasons not to laugh in the world as it is. So to be able to find laughter while acknowledging all the horror that exists around us, that to me is true wisdom. But yeah, I went on for a whole chapter on this stuff. So we are
amazing. I love that you have actually a whole chapter of it.
Yeah.
To me, is there teachings in from the Tao that talk or touch upon humor or levity at all? Was that within that teaching, or is that something that you just extracted from your greater global knowledge?
I think is more extracted, but however, there are Taoist stories that are hilarious, where the kind of first paradox always has a tendency to create humor, and Taoism is all about paradox. And then there are stories from Chuanzi, or there are the stories from EQ, who's a Zen guy, but one and the same pretty much in terms of their worldview, where it's just flat out hilarious. I'll tell you one. Like there's a tale, obviously legendary, about EQ going on this ferry with a bunch of passengers crossing the lake, and there's this guy from a rival Buddhist sect who's all in his robes, and he sees EQ with the Zen thing, and he's like, Zen, let me show you what my teacher taught me, what I can do. And he starts meditating, starts sweating, and suddenly in the front of the boat, these twigs catch on fire, and without a match or anything, and they take the shape of one of the deity worshipped by this particular sect. Say, this is what my teacher taught me. This is what my sect taught me. What does Zen have to say about that? EQ promptly pulls down his pants, pisses on the fire, putting it out, and goes like, look, it's a miracle coming right out of my body.
I love that. Okay, so that's good. There's even in the sage wisdoms, there's still the teachings of like,
if you don't laugh, I don't trust you. If you're not able to crack a good joke, I'm not so sold on the spirituality.
Amazing. I love that. I'm looking to, I wanted to share this here with you here. I'm like, probably be more adept at figuring out how to navigate this, but let's see, where is it? This is this is the one. Okay. This is also a good chance for me to practice. How do we bring this, like, okay. Can you see this?
Yeah. 1.3 million humans killed, half of them children. 1.6 million animal sacrifices, a dozen entire groups annihilated. 10 plagues, and the whole earth flooded. Any more acts of divine love, my lord, or are we ready to wrap the book? That's awesome. One with the cap, awards, best dad, and all loving God. That's pretty fun.
And of course, the poster in the back that says "Hang in there."
Hang in there, of course, with Jesus on the cross. Yeah, that's Yeah, probably wait until after the bar mitzvah.
I can't release this part of the conversation until then, but there's the part of me that feels like I could talk for days and I could bring it out. We had an amazing discourse, and that I would want to share, but then there's a part of me that thinks like that says everything I want to say.
Yeah.
And can we be like, oh, laugh, and then like, great, now can we move on? It's a lot like Forrest Gump, that just can we just decide to stop running? Like, do we have to even go through a whole process, or could we collectively be like, well, that was fucking crazy?
Yeah, indeed.
And then just stop.
That would be a good start.
Yeah, we'll see. But this is amazing, man. I'm so glad we could drop in. Thank you for the time, and would love to do it again. Really, anytime. This was epic.
Definitely. We'll do this again.
Thanks, brother.